All right, we're just going to quickly review this about the panier. And I'm going to show you how to find this. We're going to watch this video again about the 18th century found garment so that you can, when you're looking at your 18th century work, you actually can imagine how it's worn. So it would be worn over pantaloons with this structure, cage structure that sticks out on the side only, not front and back, just to the side. Panier, it's a French word. We're also the dress that we're gonna look at is in à la française, the style of the Watteau, and famously painted by a painter, Watteau, so much so that the name of the garment is called the Watteau sac. So you're going to see this in our video. So let's watch it again, and we're going to stop this time so that you can actually take a look at it. It's going to be in your modules on your redrawing for 18th century to give you a real flavor. If I can find stuff like this, or if you can find anything like that, please let me know. It's tremendously valuable for us. So anybody want to say anything else before we go back to the video? Anything that was surprising, how about?
It's wild that just a random friend gave that to her and like just didn't think anything of it.
Yeah, how about the value?
But I've definitely been in those kind of positions where like it's something that like I didn't even think about, but like it could be something that.
Yeah, so what do you think, what does 40,000 pounds translate today? Is it 2 pounds per dollar? What is it? You guys know? I mean, since they've, broken from EU, it's usually, I don't know what their value is today.
I think it's $55,344.20. I just Googled it, but yeah.
Okay, so it's like 1.5 pounds to the dollar then, sort of. Okay, so thank you for doing that. Hold on, that was Cassandra, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're my detail girl. Okay, let's take a look at the modules, and then you go into your redrawings page and you will find this exquisite video. So let's take a look, because I want to talk about these things individually. So first of all, they have it on a high mannequin. Look how high the shoulders are compared to this woman. And look how long the gown is. So what's the first thing you're going to guess about this?
Maybe they wore heels.
Yeah. Yeah, they could wear heels. Yeah.
Maybe they were just very tall.
Okay, so I'm going for something really easy, Kit. It's going to drag on the ground. So it's dragging on the ground unless something else. So these understructures of the panier come out like this. And when fabric goes over, see how this is going to be held out. She'll hold it out in a minute. When fabric goes over something like that, it takes up more space. So it's this measurement, waist to floor.
Dress. I can sort of picture the
versus this measurement, waist over panier to floor, is longer. So that's first thing. Second thing, it's a split gown. So the petticoat underneath is going to be exposed, and this part will flow to the back, and the petticoat will be shorter so that the feet can move. There is that structure that holds it away from the body, which helps you be able to walk inside of this sort of elliptical shape without tripping. And then the long part of the gown will be to the back. And yes, they'll wear the heels typically that I have seen from this period are not very tall, generally between 1 and 1.5 inches in shape. So let's continue on. Anything else you want to comment about this particular, just this view? Pretty low neckline, so don't think about it as being everybody's not a prude in this period for sure.
The scene, one misty morning, a woman walking through the Abbey meadows. It's wonderful. And is it a family heirloom?
No, no.
Oh. So what is it?
Well, it was given to me by a friend in the 1960s. And she just gave it to me, you know, because I just had a daughter and I think she thought she might be.
Okay, let's look at the front closure. So this is put on like a jacket and closes in the front, right down this little fold. See how that's actually, it should be straight down. I think maybe the garment's not completely on the mannequin very well and the pannier would hold it out, but it could have distorted, or maybe it wasn't actually cut on the straight of grain. And part of our class today is we are discussing how to look at pattern shapes. So this would be one thing where we would want the straight of grain. Straight of grain really wants to fall from head to toe straight down the center of the body. Because that is the most direct line and that will give you the cleanest look. But so this is hiding what's underneath there. What kind of closure do you think is underneath there? How is it being held together? What do you think they had in that time period?
Buttons.
Hooks.
Probably hook and bar, probably some kind of hook and bar. If it was a button, and we're not really commonly using buttons much at this point, you would have buttonholes, and then this piece right here would be 2 layers, so that there would be this outside layer, there would be an underneath layer that's also folded that had buttons hole in it, and then the buttons would be stitched onto this side. So let's continue on a little bit, but I want you to be thinking about all of this detail is hand painted on this silk. And when did they hand paint it? Because look at the matched details up here, above the bust line, on the center front, and then look down the sides.
Interested later on to, you know, to dress up in it.
And did your daughter dress up in it?
No, it's never been touched. I've never seen.
Okay, so one thing that's really great about this view right here is that you can see that the design is going to fall along the way that the pannier would make the dress stick out. See these extra folds to give you the movement for the pannier, to give you the space to put that structure underneath. So this arcing or this curved line of this trim, this is the ruffled trim, this is the puffed trim with the wool tucked underneath, helps sweep the center front and the eye to the side where the detail of the pannier will exist.
And did your daughter dress up in it?
No, it's never been touched. I've never seen it out.
You've never seen it out?
No.
This is the first time you've actually
seen it on, you know, on show, yeah.
How do you think it looks?
Very nice, beautiful.
Well, how have you kept it? In a box?
Just in a box or in a drawer.
Look at that exquisite painting. So we have the painting, and this is something to keep in mind for what we're working on as well. It goes from light through middle tone to dark. So this would be a value scale with a green inside, which is, you know, red, green is complementary color. So it's not exactly complement, but it is leaning towards the yellow. So that's interesting, with actual line detail of India permanent ink in there to give us the outline of the structure. And note that it is outlined very, very subtly. This is not with a magic marker or Sharpie. Even the gentle leaves, and you can see that the actual color goes all the way up to here and down, but the outline gives us where the eye should end, and then gives us the little piece of the 3-dimensionality of the leaf by drawing the line inside. Questions? So fascinating. We get a great close-up of the lace here. This would be hand knotted at this time. And then this gold trim and set onto a green band.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's talk about what it is. It is what's known as a robe à la française, or a sackback robe. People might say, oh, obviously it's incomplete. It's got an open front. Well, it was an open robe, and you would wear a very beautiful, we call them a petticoat, but it was an underskirt really under it. And of course, you would have had wide hoops under all that to give you that wonderful silhouette.
Yeah.
And if you can imagine wearing this. And in the candlelight of the 1760s or the 1770s, which is when it dates from, how that would have glistened and sparkled, and you would have seen shadows down the side of the dress. It would have been quite extraordinary.
Yes, it would be wonderful, I should think.
The material that it's made from is really quite exquisite because it's painted silk.
Oh,
It's not embroidered. There is embroidery on it,
yeah.
but it's painted silk.
Oh,
And so this fabulous painted silk would have been imported to Europe to be made up into this dress here in England. The decorations on it are also rather wonderful. You've got at the front here these little sort of dangling tassels of chenille work.
So chenille is referring to this kind of yarn that is knotted together to create those little balls and then tied together into this piece of lace to give additional three-dimensionality to the trim. So they're highly interested in the three-dimensionalizing of the garment through both the puffed trim and the additional hanging tassels. So tassels, lace, layering of ruffles, puffed trim, ruching, which is a system of gathering, which we see here, or pleating, are all very important things that add three-dimensionality to the garment.
yes.
And then down each side, you've got raised pockets almost, which have got a little piece of wool inside, a bit like, it looks almost like a piece of cotton wool,
It does,
but it's real wool inside this panel here to give it a three-dimensional view. Extraordinary, isn't it?
It is very.
What I'd like to do, if the breeze will allow us, I'm just going to turn it round, if I may. Can you give me a hand? Gently, because it is. And we can see.
Wait, I want to go back just a tiny bit so you can actually see the side view of this, right? Here, I'll stop it in just a second. Right there. So we will be looking in a moment at these box pleated back, and you see how it's loose and it will hang down, but you see that the understructure continues. Underneath, there's a full bodice back to which this is stitched. So it's not just loose and hanging away from the body. There is an understructure underneath the garment that ends here at the waist or below the waist at the hip, to which this garment is stitched so that this sack back can flow freely. Otherwise, the garment would have no control and could fall off the body. So now let's take a look at those pleated back.
And we can see the back here, which gives it its other name, which is a sack back robe. And you've got pleats running from the shoulder blades, box pleats running all the way down to the bottom, which gives it a sort of train effect.
The color is incredible of the painting. I mean, look at the red. Now, this is a complementary color grouping with the contrast of green to the center, the deepest red going out to the pink of the light petal, in contrast with this white, which makes me think this is a cherry tree emblem because they come out white and can turn pink.
That's right, yeah.
So when you wore this, you were making really quite a statement. You can imagine.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I'm going to turn it back now, if I may. We can enjoy the front. What I also like very much are these scalloped edges. We've got scalloped edges, particularly.
We're going to go back again. I want to show you the thing about the sleeve, which is right here. I just wasn't quick enough. Okay, right there. So look at the sleeve where, and you can do this at home, but you can see that there are 3 layers, 1, 2, 3. These are called engagements. They are the layered sleeve to, again, create additional three-dimensionality, to create fluid movement, to soften the movement of the arm and cover the elbow. And then look how it's cut up in the front to expose the forearm, which is the more attractive part of the body.
What I also like very much.
Right here, you can see how it's cut all the way up. So anybody who ever wonders about the bi-level skirts that we have, short to long, they've been happening for a long time.
much are these scalloped edges. We've got scalloped edges, particularly on the sleeves here. When one looks at a dress like this, one has to.
So the scallop, does everyone know what they're talking about here? It's this shape, it's a maybe a quarter of a circle shape that goes around this, in addition to being gathered, which is a way to pull the fabric together to create fullness, which is happening underneath this little piece of trim. This is a ruffle that's cut, and it has this scalloped edge to create an even more movement than just the fullness of the ruffle would create. So every detail is left. You can see where this fine silk lace is detaching because it's so fragile. And you can see a better look at the chenille, probably wool fiber trim that has been twisted and then applied by hand to this garment.
Sleeves here. When one looks at a dress like this, one has to appreciate that this is an extraordinary survivor. Painted fabrics are notoriously difficult to keep, and the fact that it's been kept in a box for so long would perhaps explain why it hasn't just fallen to pieces, which is what so often is the fate. It is incredibly rare survivor. It's beautiful. It's a lovely design. And perhaps more importantly, a dress like this is of huge demand internationally by collectors and museums. This has a future way outside here at Tewkesbury. And who knows where it will ultimately end up. But this is for a major museum somewhere in the world. And what was just a present from a friend is now going to be worth something around £40,000.
Wow. Don't tell my granddaughter that. Oh dear, I can't believe that.
Okay, I hope that was worth our time. I have found that piece so fascinating. Actually, I found it during the pandemic, and I sent it to my mom, who had broken her arm, and she is Canadian. She's always been fascinated by things that are well made. And so this is really something that it was fun for her to look at. But I bring it to you because we're working on 18th century, and it is a really good look at a beautiful garment up close that you never know when something's going to happen. So sack, the Watteau sack, popularized by the French painter. And in our book, it's called sack back, just the regular English spelling. So that's completely okay. And you see a great illustration of it, illustration 137 in the concise fashion and history book, and discussed on page 133, and Watteau is mentioned in there. So you do want to look at these pieces of information, and it really will help inform you about the period and about what kind of people lived there. So what class of individual would this garment be related to?
High class.
The high class?
Yeah, high class. Was that Diego?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what gives you that feeling, Diego?
Just the way the material was made from and the way it was designed, all those patterns on it, everything.
I mean, the painted patterns, for one thing.
Yeah.
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 Sue? I heard you peep in.
Right. Well, the material that was involved in that, and somebody poor couldn't afford all that.
Okay, so the actual hours of labor of applying the paint to the fabric. Now let's think about that, because we are talking about pattern today. How do we find a pattern from a garment? And we're also going to talk about finding the character. So pattern, when would it have been painted, do you think? Judging from the garment that you saw. Was it before the garment was made? When it was the fabric flat? Were the pattern pieces laid out? Was it after the garment was made? Was it on a mannequin? Was it on a wire structure and they could paint through it? What do you think?
I think it was flat.
Hold on, you're gonna put your hands up. So I hear Cara and somebody else. Who was the second one?
I'm Sue.
Okay, so put your hands up. I'll call Cara, then Sue, and anybody else. You guys have to have some ideas about this. Cara.
I would say it was painted before, and the reason why is because the center seam, the flowers don't match up.
Good point. Very good observation. Sue?
I would just say that it was painted before because I think it would be too challenging to paint it on, when the garment was made. It would be much easier to do it when it was flat, before they finished it.
Well, you can have a garment, a made garment be flat. And, we're talking about artisans of the absolute highest quality. So I'm not sure difficulty, but I see your point for sure. Josephine?
Yeah, I also think that it was painted before because of the what do you call it? The when it was like in the back, the sack back.
Mhm.
I think that was when it's like overlapping. It's kind of hard to like drag that out to paint it, and then I don't know. I just feel like yeah.
Okay, you're talking about because the structure of the pleating is when fabric rolls in on itself, that it would be hard to draw on top of that after it was made. Well, that part could have been loose. So I agree with you. I agree with all of you saying that it was probably painted flat. When in the process was it painted? Is sometimes the fabric is painted as a whole. You can go buy fabric in the store these days on a bolt, and the entire thing is patterned. Has it been done that way? What do you think?
No,
Okay,
No.
Kate.
it's symmetrical along the straight, so it doesn't make sense that they would have. It would be so much more expensive to try to get pre-patterned fabric and then try to align it exactly that way. I think they'd probably have the full dress and then like paint it on.
Okay, there's a couple things we can talk about there, but Colby, you also had a comment?
Yeah, just because of kind of the same reasons, like it would be, I think you'd want to get a plan of how much silk you needed and then buy it. And because it's so custom made that it would just take hours to assume someone would want something like this, or not hours. It would just be so expensive to make that in mass. And it would take hours to make it. So you better make sure like someone's going to buy it because of the labor.
Okay, so you mean to actually print the fabric would be so expensive that who would buy it afterwards? Now, people are buying fabric that is very, very expensive. I mean, that is definitely the case. This fabric to begin with was expensive for sure. It's silk taffeta. It's very tightly woven. It has a lot of beautiful weight. It's very fine yarn woven together in our plain weave pattern over under. So it's really tight. Now, one great thing about silk, remember they made parachutes out of it in World War I. And that was because it was really held the air well. So we're talking about something that could actually be a windbreaker, very practical and warm. So let's talk about how this could be painted. And let's talk about the patterns that we saw. So you've been really good about thinking about those. In the front, remember I said that we had a center line down the front, and you want to have the grain run down the front. Fabric has a grain. Grain runs along the length, or what is called the warp. The grain line, or the lengthwise grain line, is the warp. And these are the threads or the yarn that are at one end of the loom, and they are on spools and they go forever. It can be a mile long, okay? So we're going to look at these spools. They have a thread that come off them like this. And again, this is a very macro view. So you're looking at, whoa, that's very wide. Now, to create the 90-degree angle, we have threads that weave in and out, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Okay, we have to imagine multiple threads vertically. And this, reasonably enough, is called the cross grain. Or the weft. So here's an easy way that I think of it. And you do need to know these things as a costume designer because you're going to have to interface with the costume shop about building things. Warp speed. We're going as fast as we can for as long as we can. Those are the really long fibers and they will help the cloth fall along the body. They go along the body, okay? Cross grain interrupts those fibers. It is often more decorative. It is weaker. Warp is stronger. It can be weaker. It can be decorative. It can be heavier. It can be a slub yarn, thick and thin. It can have metallic. But the cross grain tends to make things stick out. So if I was to flip something and I want it to stick out on the side, I might cut the skirt instead of using the grain line this way, which is, when we speak of grain line, we're talking about lengthwise grain, the lengthwise grain running up and down the body. If I choose to put the crosswise grain along the body, then I'm going to have something stick out. This was common during an ethnic group called the dirndl skirt that was then adopted in the 60s. The dirndl, okay? So you might think, well, would we want to do that for this garment? Would we want to do it because we want those side panels to stick out? In this case, we don't need them to stick out on their own. So we'll cut everything along the lengthwise grain. Let's take a look at what those pattern pieces might look like. And then we're going to look at a couple of garments here that we have. So here's our fabric. The length can be infinite, as I said. That's the warp. The weft is finite. And it is determined by the width of the loom. So in this time period, we have looms that are fairly narrow. Usually typical for Asian would be 12 to 18 inches. And here we'd have 30 inches. Now we have looms that are, 108. You don't have seams in your sheets, so you've got wide looms. But let's say this is determined by the width of the loom, okay? So it is finite. When you go to the fabric store and you buy fabric, and this is the job of the designer, you're going to buy yardage, which is the length, and bolts come in 25-yard increments by a certain width. And typical, depending on what kind of fabric, if you're getting imported fabric, it could be 36, 30, any of those previous increments. Our average is 44 to 45, 58 to 60, and then we have some of the wider fabrics which are used for upholstery and home furnishings. So we're always talking about the width and the flat piece. So we're going to assume that this is one layer of fabric. What do you do if you need 2 layers? So let's say I'm going to cut the front, and we saw our garment. We're going to put her right here. So here's the front of the garment. There's a center front. Remember, it was a point. There was a sleeve with a ruffle trim. Okay. So I need a left and a right. There are some modes of thought that feel you should always cut those individually. Some feel that you should cut them together so that it's more uniform. We could go ad nauseum into what are the particulars, but just know this, that every shop you work with will have a rule about it. And it's not your job as a designer to argue with them. It's your job to explain what you need and how you see the garment happening. So in this case, look at this line. This is gonna be our center front line right here, right? That's gonna become our straight of the grain line. So we're gonna put this on this page. This, I should have looked more carefully, but I bet it has some kind of a shaping piece right here, because they need to make an allowance for the bust and the corset underneath. So that will be another pattern piece. How would we create that? What does it look like? And I'm going to talk about, there's two ways you can do it. You can either flat pattern, which is putting it on a table, and we're going to look at that, which this would be flat pattern, or you can put it on a mannequin. And when you're working with a mannequin, you can just actually put the piece on the mannequin and pin it to the mannequin and draw your lines on it. So some of you will be more geometric in feel, and you can translate things into that. And different cutters have different systems. Some do both, some do draping, some do cutting, which is flat pattern. So Nancy talked about that on Wednesday. So when you're cutting your first pattern, what does it look like? Well, we can cut this basic pattern, assuming that we have a sleeve seam right here at the shoulder, right? Humans are really a T shape, right? This is a human. Let me get his head up. Let me get the head up a little higher. So think about everything based on a T. We have a neck. We have a shoulder, which is going to curve down. And then we have arms from that, right? The waist is going to come down from there. But you can see the T underneath that. And we need to be able to work within that. What is our T shape? What's the T shape that we have in costume? We've had it for centuries. Don't disappoint me. It's something that you can always use. It's like the perfect word for almost anything. When we have a T-shaped garment, what is it called?
A t-shirt?
Tunic.
Tunic. Woo! Diego, you're getting a gold star on that. Here you go. Double blue star. Tunic. Right? And that's where we get t-shirt from. I mean, doesn't it look like a t-shirt? We still use that same thing. T-shirts today, however, have this little seam right here, right? But the tunic shape is one that we have used for centuries. It was, well, first we got the pins up here, right? Brooches. We had rectangles. They were holding rectangles together by pins. And then this draped down. But then they got that idea of, well, we could actually have a T shape. As soon as we got sewing, we got tunics. So you can see how that is a human being works that way. And that's why you want to see, when you're translating a pattern, you're always thinking about how does it go? Again, here's the lengthwise grain, here's the crosswise grain, okay? So I'm going to look at this pattern and I'm going to think, how does this translate here? Now I flattened this out. So maybe if we were still looking at the three-dimensional garment, it might be more confusing, but you're going to be drawing something. So you have to have an idea of what it's going to look like. So let's say I'm going to put this on the fold. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm lying because it's open down the front. So half of this piece, we're going to have the center front is straight, this curved neck edge, the shoulder, which drops, the arm's eye in this period is a very high and tight arm's eye. We have very low arm's eye now, but the higher the arm's eye is, the more movement you can have. Okay, so when we're doing dance costumes, very high, and then we can even make them more movement. And then we have a little bit of shaping down the side. The side is shorter than the front. So we have a basic shape. If I am going to make an allowance for this, for the bust, for movement, I need to put in fullness right here. And that's called a princess line. So that would be right here from the side to here. If I create a curved edge, I will create fullness, because when you have a curve, here's my lengthwise grain, here's my cross grain. Well, as soon as I go here on this curve, I'm at the 45-degree angle. Okay, sorry to bring in your geometry, but 45-degree angle, when you're doing that, you're working with the bias. And we talked about the bias in the 1930s Thin Man. So when we go from here to here, we get movement. Okay, so the same is true if I cut this shape on the bias and I put these two shapes together, I will be creating shape in the garment. So then I can either draw this on here and then I have two pieces. And then I have this piece that's in here. Right? So there's my two pieces. See how we can just literally translate this into the bodice. Now we talked about the back. The back is underneath is going to have, it's a higher neckline, first of all, right? Probably has a very shallow sleeve and is either shaped probably cut down the middle. I would say this is a shaping device. So this is going to be on the straight of grain, and it likely also has a shape in the back to create some movement because they want it really tight to the body. This garment piece is underneath the Watteau sock. Okay, that piece of the back is cut separately and goes from the back neck to the floor. So note that I've drawn one piece here that's cut down the middle, but I've drawn half of a piece here. So this would have a note that says cut to. Okay. When we have the pattern laid out like this, now we can paint it. So on this particular piece, I'm going to erase this for us. Remember how we had that extension to conceal the center front? So this goes out here. Okay, and then it's folded and comes back on itself, and it will stick out from the center front to allow for that closure. So this is cut to, and we need to know where that center front line is, because now that we're painting it, the paint is going to be on this side. And then you can lay the other one this way and paint it, and even the back. And make them symmetrical. Remember, this had that great design. I think it was, which way was it going? This way, maybe. So you can then paint on it flat, and you would put something underneath it to absorb the paint, or you'd paint it in the air so that it did not smear all over. You paint the fabric dry, and the paint would be wet. Okay. All right, so this gives you an idea of flat how to pattern something that we saw on the bodice of this. It's a pretty big topic, but you can see how if you look at the garment, it really tells you what you want. That's why this idea of construction, drawing from an actual thing, from a historical piece, and then figuring out, these are called style lines. Where are your style lines? And that's something every single shop will ask you. So if we don't have these, the first thing a shop person's going to ask is, how is that garment going to be fit? Where do we make the allowance for the bust? Now, there's other places besides creating that line, but that's something that you would need to be able to talk about. If you absolutely do not want to have any interruption in there, then you're going to have to create a shape on the side to allow for the bust, right? Because the bust takes up room. Even with a shaped corset underneath, it's pushing the bust into a particular area. And a corset at this point is the boned undergarment. We would have the chemise, which is the undershirt, then the boned undergarment, then this on the top of that, okay? The bodice. What about the sleeve? How do you think the sleeve is going to look? Sleeves are kind of weird. Ideas? Questions before we just like barrel through?
Well, sleeve is kind of like a tube, right? So.
Okay, great job. Great job. A sleeve is like a tube. Let's get one on here. Okay. So you can see that clearly in the Renaissance because they don't know what to do up here. They just end the garment right here. And then the shirt sticks out, right? So a sleeve is like a tube. I'm drawing a tube. Where's the grain line for a sleeve? How's it going to fall? This way or this way? So in other words, does the lengthwise grain fall along the arm or across the arm? Think about it. Nobody. Along. So it's going to go lengthwise this way. There are some things that you can do to help a sleeve. First of all, what are you going to do about the part from here to here? Well, look at this. This is a shape. So it's going to have a cap. This is the sleeve cap. This is the shoulder. The center of the shoulder. That changes with a lot of different kinds of garment. So, but anyway, you do have a sleeve cap of some kind. This gives you an allowance for the shoulder and for movement. Because what do we know about this? We already know that this is partly bias. So it's going to allow for some stretch and it's going into, this is a pretty straight line, but the back has some curve to it. So that's going to allow for movement. Okay, we need to allow for movement. So it's going to have some kind of a cap. And then also in this time period, they even allowed for a little of that down here by having the sleeve shaped so that it's still straight at the grain. But now this is a curve, so it will provide stretch because it's leaning towards the bias. Before we had stretch garments, which everyone now is probably, how many of you are wearing something that doesn't have stretch? We had to cut for stretch, okay? So the sleeve shape right here is basically a tube that has a cap, and then it has a little bit of a swing to allow for elbow movement, okay? And then the inside piece would be slightly smaller. So, you know, convex to convex. And then you're creating a shaping piece. It would be a 2-piece sleeve. You would cut 2 of these and 2 of the inside. Okay. What about the ruffle? Any ideas on the ruffle? The trim on the sleeve? I'm going to show you a sample. So how do you think the ruffles cut? Remember I said it was gathered material? How do you think it's cut? So it could be cut like this. And then you say gather this. And it would then look like this, right? It would give us a little ruffle. Is that what we looked at on that? There is another ruffle, which is called a circular ruffle. So circles, we're still on rectangles and circles here. Circle ruffle is cut like this. And then when this is flat or gathered, this creates a much softer line. Okay. So let's take a look at those. Here we have the first of all, just the gathered straight ruffle. And they have a ratio. So this is 2 times 2 to 1. It's 2 times as wide as the length that it's taking up. And you can see that this ruffle is fairly pretty, right? It's fairly graceful. And the bottom one is much fuller, and that is a 3 to 1. So 3 times the width of the fabric to create the finished product. So you can see the difference in these two. Less fullness and more fullness in the green. Does that make sense to everybody? Now keep that in mind, and then let's look at the circular ruffle. So you can see how that folds and falls much more simply and gracefully. The bottom one has absolutely no gathers. It's simply the circle stitched in a straight line to create that undulating hemline. The second layer is the 2 to 1 ruffle, and the third layer is the 3 to 1 or 15 inches of the circle, then gathered into a 5-inch piece. And this is probably a 15-inch piece, so it'd be 45 inches of a circle gathered into a 15-inch piece. So note how graceful that falls. So this is something that you need to know as a designer. Am I going to create this sort of a graceful ruffle, or do I just need a straight ruffle? You know, a gathered skirt, straight ruffle. Maybe the sleeve on a circle, okay? So there's many ways that we can determine that. All right. Any questions on the bodice and the sleeve, and how can you kind of see that? Can you kind of see how those things go together to create shape? Does that make sense to everybody? Doesn't make sense. We're all asleep.
Yes.
Thanks, Cassandra. Yay. Yay. I love your reaction.
Makes sense.
Woohoo. Okay. And if it doesn't make sense, raise your hand, because it's okay if it doesn't make sense. This is not an easy thing. We're talking about taking a 2-dimensional thing, putting it into another 2-dimensional thing that creates a 3-dimensional shape. So it is very complex, much more complex than we think. Josephine, question?
Yeah, I had a question about the arm that you cut.
The sleeve. Uh-huh.
Yeah, exactly. From like, you don't do two of these like shoulder caps, right?
You would cut two of these.
Yeah, but not for the underarm.
Yeah.
Under the arm. Yeah.
That's right. Right.
That will be
So this is cut two. Yeah, I'll draw that for you.
yeah, thank you.
Underpiece. Is going to look like this. So it's going to be this part, right? This actually goes like this. If I was going to make this in one, so the underneath looks like this, and it will be curved this way. Okay. So if I'm making a full sleeve, I would make that shape. The full sleeve cap has those little wings on it, but I'm making it in two pieces, so I'm making this piece. So let me just show you this for 1 second and clean this up. If I was going to cut this sleeve in one, like we talked about the bodice, I would have to have a wing like this for underneath and a wing in for the front, okay? And this would become the under sleeve. I would have a one-piece sleeve, and I would sew this piece to this piece to create this seam right here, okay? So if I'm doing a two-piece sleeve, which is what we talked about, this one, I'll take this away, then I'll have two seams, one here and one here, and then I have one underarm seam right here. So excellent question. No, you don't have two sleeve caps, right? You have one sleeve cap per sleeve, and then you have an undersleeve, and you would cut two of each. And you really want to make sure when you're cutting a curved sleeve, you definitely have to have a right and a left, because there's less fullness in the front than there is in the back. How many times have I put one in backwards? Because you can't tell the right from wrong on the fabric. Very, very tricky. We are not going to get into those intricacies. That is costume technology, where we talk about the system of notching and numbers and how you put things together. But just know that, yeah, excellent question, Josephine. You're really seeing it. I can tell you're seeing it because you're asking a question that's very sophisticated about the sleeve cap. Any other questions? Because we're going to go to the skirt. Nothing? Okay. I don't want to rush you. Okay. So let's go to our skirt. This had an open front, which we're just going to draw two straight lines. It would have a panier on the side and stick out and come down. And then it's going to train to the back. Okay. So how do we allow for something like this? It's going to open to the side just because of the force of the panier pulling it apart. It won't be a straight line. We will cut it on the straight, however. We'll cut it so that it'll be together in center front. This will be a center front line. So this line goes all the way down the body, right? Remember, we're allowing for this understructure under here. So again, we're going to look at that. What happens? Let's make a guess. We know you're going to need more fabric to go over this, right? So what is something that's going to happen? How do we allow for more fabric? Remember the term I just used? Was called gathering. Gather.
Would it be gathering or would it be pleats?
Okay, there's several ways that we could do that, but let's, what we're doing is creating fullness. Probably,
I mean, I think that one probably had both, but
no, well, there's a couple of things. One thing is there is a system of called cartridge pleating. That cartridge pleating is a Renaissance technique. Pleating is going to give you a different feel than gather. So pleating, and let me just show you a pleated garment. Pleating is a system of folds where there's more cloth in here, okay? More cloth in here, and it allows for fullness, okay? Gathering also allows for fullness. I thought I had something with gathering, but I have 3 different kinds of things here, none with gathering. So gathering allows for fullness also. You know, we just looked at these 2 different ways to allow for gathering. It depends on your preference. I think you could do it either way, okay? And by the way, there are existing pattern books where they have taken garments like this apart and you can actually look at them. And then they'll give you some kind of instructions. So for now, let's just say fullness is added to create, to allow for this to come over here, right? So if we have a waist, and let's just talk measurements. We have a waist that's 28. We have a hip that's 40. We know we need multiple widths to go around here. And let's say we probably need at least 3 times the width of the hip minimum, because it's going to stick out. And if you don't know, you want to create these panniers first, and then you can literally do this as a draping project and take amounts of fabric and then gather them up onto the mannequin and then just hold them over and say, how much fullness do I need? So let's look at our mannequin. Here is our mannequin. So here's her waist. She's a 31. And let's say I'm going to put something wide. There's a wide variety of things besides pannier. We also have other things called bum rolls, which are just structures here. But I need to create some kind of fullness to put this on. How am I going to do that? What would be a reason that this information could be valuable to you as a designer? It's like, oh, I'm a designer. I don't want to know any of that stuff. What do you think?
it helps you to communicate to the sewers.
Well, okay, who's going to communicate to the sewers? Who is really communicating to the stitchers? So you might be in the shop, but usually the shop manager, usually you're talking to the shop manager, but why would you also need to have this information? One of the big reasons is you're going to have to buy the fabric. How much do you need? What if you find the perfect thing and you get 6 yards and you needed 10? And how would you know that if you haven't thought about these pattern pieces and had some kind of discussion? So let's look at this mannequin on our waist and let's look at some fabric. This is a piece of silk, 42 inches wide. It kind of mirrors our piece. It is hand painted. And then the embroidery has outlined the painting. So this is actually a very beautiful piece of fabric. This is the satin side, okay? And you could also use the matte side. This is the right side because this is a chain stitched piece. So if I'm going to use this piece, I'm going to try this on my mannequin and see. Before I do this, I will have tried a sample on my mannequin so I know how much I need, okay? This is a 42-inch piece. It's fairly narrow, so I'm going to pin it together and be able to work with 84 inches and then see if that's going to be enough for my fullness that I need. So if I need, that would give me 168 inches around the body, which seems that seems pretty good for a 40-inch hip. That would be 4 to 1 more than the hip fullness. Okay. So I'm going to work on half the garment. I'm going to put my seam right here and see how this looks. And you can do this. This is draping. When I'm working on the mannequin, I'm draping. You can do this by just securing it with pins. Here's my center front. I'm going to allow some and fold it back because I know that I'll have to have a facing piece, right, for the inside of the garment. I'm just going to put it here and pin it. The mannequin is very handy because it pins. If you don't have a mannequin, you'll have to learn how to do things flat, and you can. You absolutely can. I never had a mannequin till I was lucky enough to go to college. Aha, and now I've made a fatal mistake because I have pinned shiny to matte. See that? Okay, but it's because I'm using the other end of the piece, so I don't want to cut it. This is my center back. I have a center back seam, fortunately, on my girl, my mannequin, so I'm just going to put my center back here, allowing for this salvage to be off. In order to pull this up and see what it's like, I'm going to tie a ribbon around the waist. And this is twill tape, and we have 1/4-inch style tape that you can use to this is a great way to absolutely figure out what your shape is going to be. So I'm going to just take the center of this and pull it up and say, okay, is this about what I'm looking for? And then I can go along and pull this piece up. So there's a couple things I can do. And then the pleating can be a decision that happens afterwards, Cara, because what you need to do is first of all, allow the fullness. The pleating gives you a more rigid line. So maybe if you were working on a more tailored garment, you might want to have that more rigid line. So very uncooperative right here. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to pull my pieces so that they're even. So I have an even amount above and below. And let's do the same with this piece. Because where's my fullness? In the pannier, the fullness is at the side, primarily at the side. There is some fullness in the front and back because in the back here, what you saw was a watteau. So technically it would come up like this and be pleated here, okay? In a box pleat. So that the fullness would run all the way down the garment, okay? And then this would go to the side and it would have this big wide angle out of it to allow it to go up and to be this watteau piece. So that would be the watteau portion. We're just going to do something that's more straightforward, not the watteau, which was certainly a very specific and certainly a style of dressing in the robe à la française, but it is not common. It's not as common. It was popularized by the artist Watteau. So here we go. We're just going to have some fullness here. And you see how with a style tape, you can actually get a pretty good idea of what it's going to look like. And this piece, I'm using that for my facing, so I don't really care about that. It's flat, it doesn't have any design. And then I can look at this as a whole and say, is this enough fullness? Does this give me enough to allow my peignet to come out? Do I want it to look like that? Okay. I don't like the way that's moving this way. I think I need to cut a curved shape. Okay. So then I would determine that this would need to be a curved shape so that this is smoother going into here. And this would have to be higher to allow for the fullness to pooch out right here. See how that makes sense? This is when I have to allow for the peignet, which sometimes they were clear out to here. Oh, sorry, I'm falling apart because I didn't have my two pieces together. There we go. Sometimes they're clear out to here. You don't want to have this fullness here and then have it seem skimpy on the side. You want the fullness to be uniform, okay? So as I'm going further out, I need to allow by curving my shape here, just like I did over my sleeve cap, and have my garment have a curved shape for the skirt. And then basically, skirts are pretty much a rectangle. So this would have a I want to use this doll for something else. I'm going to pull this off. So a skirt really would be primarily a rectangle and have a wide variety of uses. There can also be circle skirts, which then create that look like the circle ruffle does, right? Okay, so this garment we have patterned. That was a beautiful piece of fabric to use, wasn't it? And the skirt shape may look something like this. So center front, and then we'd allow fullness and it would curve up. This would be my side seam. Okay, so it gives some sort of a shape like this, and it can go to center back. So see how that imitates the sleeve in a way. And then that would allow for the fullness on the peignet. All right, that happens to be a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to take about 5 minutes and show just a couple of other garments that we can talk about shapes. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about character. So still with our fabric. And I haven't posted our pictures yet, so from our last drawing. So I'll do that. And I have them, I just haven't done it. But this is one of the garments we used in our last drawing. And this garment is literally laced together on the side. And look at this shape. What is it?
A rectangle.
It's a rectangle. It has a slight curve here. Just a slight curve to allow for the arm's eye. But really, this is a tabard, very typical. It is a rectangle that is center front, is straight down. So again, cutting this piece, no problem. We have the center front. We have two rectangles. Let's just put them up there. And then maybe it's a shaped sleeve slightly. Maybe. So shaped. The center front is a V. Then it has a line down the front. It's cut in two pieces. So now we have, this is the front with a very slight shape for the arm, the armhole, very slight. And the back very minimal shaping here for the back slope, and the sleeve, very shallow sleeve shape. Right? So that could be a seam, or maybe it's not a seam depending on your fabric. But we have a very simple rectangle piece. So see how easily we can translate one thing into a pattern. Let's look at something else that we looked at. And by the way, on that 18th century dress with that covered placket opening, if we had to do a quick change, we could cover a zipper in there if we had to, couldn't we? And this is a hook. This is a hook that is a kind of a closure. That's a snap. This is a hook. This is you can see that it's a hook shape. It comes up like this and it hooks onto a bar. These metal pieces have been around forever. Snap is more contemporary, so that would not be common. But this idea of a hook going onto a bar has been around for centuries. So let's look at this shape. What do you think about this? First of all, this is a man's garment, so you wouldn't see the bust under there. It's a basic rectangle that we've just worked with here. The neck is now circled. In the front. And not open, but the seam is still there. The center front is still on the straight of grain. And then we have a yoke that comes across. This is pleated. So these rectangles are the same as this, but now it's just wider so that we can put this fullness in here, and then we allow for this very small shaping under the arm, okay? The back is identical. Here's the yoke. This is the rectangle, allowing for pleating, and this looks like a 2-to-1 to me, so it's what you see on top is doubled underneath. So it's a 2-to-1 ratio. And the sleeve is virtually a big rectangle. Here's the undersleeve, and this is the sleeve cap, creating fullness. And you can see it would give us fullness here. If we wanted to have this kind of a fullness sleeve, this would do that as well. And this is, I think it's supposed to be gathered into there, but it looks like it's partially pleated, partially gathered. So I don't think they could make their mind up. This one doesn't match. Oh, well, we're not couturier. So questions on how this is really just a rectangle. Again, same rectangle we're dealing with as always. We can also make a modification on that. With this cape. And what has changed here? This piece, which is called the yoke, is now curved. And that's basically the only thing that's different. See how this line of roses goes all the way across? So this is cut on the straight right here, just gathered into this piece. And now we are dealing with a curved yoke that has pleats. And that gives us a big difference in how the garment looks, even though it's essentially the same construction. The same construction. And this has this is a box pleat right here. This is a big box pleat opening in the back. This is what the Watteau sack had that we saw. Box pleat is 2 folds coming together, and underneath there is extra fullness to allow for additional trainage on this garment, which has a huge train. Let's take a look at a couple contemporary pieces. Well, not contemporary. Let's look at pieces that are at least of this century, of the 20th century. First, we'll go to a jacket. Open front. Okay. It's hard to see the black. I'm wondering if I can get more light, but I don't think so. So this has a shaped sleeve. I'm going to show you this because it has seams right here. It's darted to create this. So it has a shape like this, but it doesn't have fullness because they've taken the fullness out by the system of darting. And then it has another dart down the front, a sleeve seam. But basically, doesn't this look like the black tabard? It's a rectangle with a V front, opening center front, and the back absolutely plain. I want to show you the inside of this to show you how these darts work, because this is an authentic garment. It's really beautiful. So this is where they have, I want to see if I can find that picture again. Wait, I could see the light. Here we go. So this is where you have pinched the fabric and then stitched it in place to create the dart. Can you see that? This is where the fabric has been removed instead of gathered. And it gives us that fullness over the shoulder. But it gives us a fullness and an elegance that is not gathered. Okay. Another kind of a garment. This is a 40s piece. The previous was probably a 30s. So this is a little small for my mannequin, although I could probably put it on this size measurement. Mannequins are not forgiving. In other words, there's no give here. I could, so I can't, really button it, but on a human, I might be able to. Because mannequins have no squish factor. Humans have squish factor. All right, so this at first glance seems very complicated, and yet it really is a semicircle cape with no gathers, just like the sleeve that we saw. And if we take this away, we're looking at what we saw before based on the rectangle, but now, like our 18th century garment, really nipped in the waist. So we have a side seam and we have darts and darts shaping everything so that it's really fitted to the body. Okay, and then a very cute little pocket. And this dips below the waist, which is telling me this is a 40s piece, imitating a slight peplum. And the shoulder has a very smooth sleeve cap. Okay, note how the sleeve swings to the front. So it has that slight curve right here to allow for the elbow movement. And this is actually a two-piece sleeve like we discussed. Here's the undersleeve right here. Okay. And then we have the oversleeve that is creating that additional shape, just as we discussed in the 18th century. Amazing how we repeat things over and over and over. I wish I was Julia Child and I had, 14 things set up and I could just go, and now.
Was that last garment a vintage piece or was that made?
Last garments were vintage. This is a vintage piece. This is a vintage piece, completely vintage. This, we'll just look at this for fun. It's a vintage piece. I don't know if I can get this on this mannequin. The floors were stripped and cleaned last week, so everything is moved into a different place. So it's very, all the mannequins are next door. But fortunately, everything's fitting on this girl. So this is a vintage 40s piece as well. Again, it's almost identical. But look at the styling, makes you think it's not identical because it has an asymmetrical hemline. There is pleating. There you go, right here. That is now falling lengthwise, but the pleating is on the cross grain to give us this detail and the shape. And then the back is shaped. Again, we have the center back seam, the two side back seams. It's like the camera reads it and then it disappears. Okay, and then we have a dart and the side seam. And then we have that beautiful asymmetrical hemline. The neck edge comes to a V in the center. The reason why it's not is because there's not a button here. So it would come to a V in the center, simply a regular collar that is not folded back. Okay, it could be folded back. Now would give us a lapel, but it's up. And then it's asymmetrical, imitating the double-breastedness of that period, but only on one side. So you see that this is centered, but this piece overlaps to create that double-breasted effect. That's a Lillian. She's a famous designer. The other one was also a great piece as well.
Are these pieces in City College's?
Oh yeah, we have hundreds of them.
How do you get them? Are they donated or you purchased them or?
All of the above.
Wow.
Yeah, we have, I would say we have probably over 10,000 garments.
Wow.
Okay, I don't think I can get this on this girl. I don't want to try because this is a vintage garment as well. We'll just hold her up. We'll pin it up to the body. So this is a 50s dress, okay? It is, notice how, this idea of peekaboo, this is actually a ribbon inside of a piece that's held together by bias, right? So skin would actually show through here. That's nothing new, even though people say it's new now, right? But la-ti-da. It would be secured in the back by a bow. And this piece, we'll just pin it onto her. Has a wide variety of styling and is given shape by the cut. Of the garment. Okay, so here are two pleats to give us room for the bust, and it's creating this fold line. This would come under the bust and create shape. Remember, it ties to the back. And then the sleeve also has a tie and a pleat to create shape. And this is cut in one, okay? So this is a dolman or a raglan sleeve. A raglan sleeve has no separate sleeve seam. It's simply the T shape and an angle. So there's no separate sleeve. It's cut as one piece. See how that goes? Just shaped like the body and then comes into the garment. And then the garment itself, the skirt piece, is full, but there is no gather or pleat. This is cut on a circle. I want to see what's going on right there. So there is a, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, it's that other garment that doesn't have a pleat. I'll show you that one. So this one is pleated. It has a pleat in the center front. Let me get her on the doll so we can take a look. There we go. So here's a center front. We're familiar with this by now, this box pleat, which opens up. and gives it not very wide, not like that big cape that we just saw. And then just these are micro pleats. That's 1/4 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And then it's cut. You can see that this line does not go equal. It does not run perpendicular to this line. It is cut on the bias. So this line is running at a diagonal to this horizontal line. Does that make sense to everybody? But look at how much fullness it gives us. Okay. So it's a very flattering design. And then this garment, I don't know if I can get this on here, but this is the one I thought I was pulling out, which has a seamed fullness to the skirt. I'm going to put this a little lower because I want the waist to represent where the waist is on the garment. Always working with these fragile garments with our straight silk pins because they are very forgiving. Okay, so this has a V-neck and then a little split for extra detail in the front. And this garment is a group of seams. So it's shaped by seaming. See if I can get her on here. And these seams are called gore, G-O-R-E. It's just a series of seams and you'll see how it can create fullness. So we do have our center front seam going all the way down. I just want to make sure is it cut on the straight. And it actually is cut on an angle to create additional fullness. And then each one of these increments starts narrow, and ends wide. So let's follow this one all the way down to the bottom. And you'll see that it ends up this wide. So it starts here and is actually physically cut wider. So these things are called gores. And they look like this. So it's narrow and then each piece is cut wider. And then it's seamed to next to a piece. When these two are together, it creates that shape. Okay, and then I want you to look at this up close. Again, it's a vintage garment. This is a cocktail dress. It's gray with starburst pattern, and you can relate this to the late 50s. It's beginning of the space age Sputnik period. But notice it's embellished with pearls. These are hand stitched on in a random pattern to create interest. And again, that idea of three-dimensionality. This is also a dolman sleeve cut in one piece and ending here. Look at the stress point. That garment has worn out because this is not quite enough room for this person. Maybe they gained weight, maybe they had some kind of wild movement, but it's not a very forgiving sleeve, is it? Because it ends here and it has this little small curve shape. So the minute you raise your arm, you get a split. Okay, let's take a break and then we'll come back. So I have 11:25. Let's just take 5 minutes. 11:30. See you in then. Remember that most of things are based on a rectangular format because the human is rectangle. When we want to follow the body, we're working in rectangles. When we want to go against the body, then, and we're creating more fluidity or curves, we're working in circles. So it's just a very simple way to keep track of how pattern works and the lengthwise grain of patterns. We're going to talk about character today because I want to remind you about the Lion in Winter project. So we'll take a quick look at that. We have the module set up specifically for Lion in Winter. So I'd like you to look at that. Based on what we discussed last week, here is our Lion in Winter costume design project due April the 5th. Here's our whiteboard discussion. So we've already been working on this since the 22nd of February. We were assigned earlier. And this, just to refresh, well, let's go, just to refresh your memory. We talked about the presentation and how it would work together to create this. And then next we have the timeline, which we discussed. How do you set a timeline for a design project? We talked about starting at opening night, or in this particular case, opening night is the due date, April 5th. So we start here with April 5th and we work our way backwards, or to the time when the play was assigned, February 10th. So we've been working on it already for a month. You should have the play really in your head. You've developed your theme, you're understanding that. You have a concept related around that, possibly an icon, a signature detail for each character. We're going to talk about that a little bit more today. We had the discussion on the rubric for Lion in Winter on the 22nd. On the 26th, your organizational tool was completed for understanding the play. So whether you chose to do a cross plot or not, your organizational tool, there's some way that you're organizing this material. It is essential because you'll need to be able to reference the characters and the moments in the play somehow. Your research has begun. You're looking for inspiration. I hope you guys have we had that discussion last week where we've had inspiration. So it was really helpful. I went in a couple of your breakout rooms. Very, very exciting. So your research is complete as of last Friday. You're still continuing to research. You almost never stop researching. There will always be something that you'll need to look at and you'll think, oh, wait a minute. Now how is he going to get that key again? Where is that going to come out of? They don't really have pockets. What's going to happen? So you need to think about each one of these kinds of details. The research isn't done, but you have the big picture in mind. This week, you're working on your rough sketches to find the characters. You're looking at your fabric swatches to find color inspiration. Sometimes you don't know where to go to find your character. So sometimes you go right to the fabric. Sometimes you go to color. Sometimes you just do some blots down there. Diego.
So for the rough sketches, are we are sketching every single character or just some of them?
7. There's only 7.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so you're doing all 7, and that's on the rubric. So on March 19th, your rough sketches, which is next Friday. Your rough sketches, you're selecting, these are the ones. I'm doing 2 or 3 sketches for each character because I only have 7 characters. And one thing you want to do is develop the character fully. And then maybe one of those is the one that you're going to use to create the color rendering. So you're going to begin on the paper that you want to use with the sketch that you think, or re-sketch it. And then you have your dressing list complete. This is top to bottom. What is my character wearing? So here on the April 5th, we have a week after we get back from spring break to finalize these. And on April 5th, we'll do a presentation. So let's look at the rubric. And this is what we've talked about. Your oil presentation is well prepared. You're covering it. You're covering all your points. You have a theme. You're supporting your theme with comments from the play. Again, these are maximum 5 minutes. Okay. Your visual presentation is your 7 renderings. Your concept is well illustrated. It's clear. You have good swatching. You have a research folder that has a cross plot organizational tool, dressing lists, your rough sketches, and then this is looking at your painting techniques. So that's why I want to spend time on painting. This is your checklist, your historical folder, minimum of 2 pieces of research for each character, minimum. Usually I end up with many, 40. Dressing lists for each of the 7 characters, color rendering for each of the 7 characters with swatches. So this is the presentation portion, cross plot or organizational tool, rough sketches for each character, and your concept statement. So that's all in your folder now in our module that is Line and Winter module. And as we get other information, it will be filled in this Line and Winter module. That was what you guys requested, as opposed to having it by week. But I am going to try to put them on the overview list. So week 9 is where we are, finding the character and the pattern shapes. And here is our overview for today. Lecture, finding the character in the script. We're going to review pages 13 to 31 and 36 to 41 in Ingham and Covey. You can do that on your own. The pattern piece, finding the garment. How does the garment break down into a pattern? And that's pages 165 to 180 in the Ingham and Covey book. We'll have a color media lab on Wednesday, so be sure you have your paints available, because we want to talk about looking at rendering fabric, and we will do that. We'll have the mannequins again. Work on the Line in Winter, continue doing that during this week so that your research is complete, your organization is done, and you're working on your rough sketches. And again, you can reference chapter 4 in your Ingham and Covey, and then submit your redrawings redrawings number 7 on chapter 6 in the later book. So this is the only thing that's due this week, but you need to keep working on your Line in Winter. So I will try to remember to do that for each week so that you don't forget to keep working on Line in Winter. Okay, questions about that? Let's talk about the character. Remember when we were discussing the character and their function and who they are, what they are in the play, what their relationships are in the play, what is their description? Okay. So in the quiz, many people said, well, Nick is 40, late 30s, and he's retired. He's married to Nora. We're going to talk about Line in Winter in a minute, but what would be my question about saying I'm sorry, I don't have a chair, so I have to kind of do this. I'll be doing my leg exercises. My question when you make a statement like that is, how is it that Nick is retired in the late 30s, at his late 30s? That's not a retirement age. So as a character description, it's not giving me enough information to put those two things together. It's almost an oxymoron. Late 30s, retired. We need to have that piece of the information about the extreme wealth, that he had been a successful detective, but he's married to Nora. Nora's father died. So unless Nora's father was hit by a car, or I don't know, do we know about that? Then he has inherited great wealth through his wife. So if you're talking about Nora, one of the things you want to talk about is, she holds the money. She's pushing the play forward because she's pushing him to get work. And why is that? So there's some things we need to talk about. Okay, end of that discussion. Moving forward to Line in Winter. How are we going to find out about these characters? What is our number one thing we look at?
Their interactions with each other.
Okay, so let's look at this. Before we have interactions with each other, we have to have the script. Okay, you're going to go back to the script many times. You can't design based on one reading. Probably not based on 2 readings. Maybe not based on 3. Sometimes you read it 3 times before you even start drawing, before you start researching to find the details. What is going on in the script? And then we can go to interactions with others. and what the character says about themselves. Sorry, I can't get my phone off. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I tried to get it off earlier. What does a character say about themselves? How do they present themselves? What is their personality? How they say their words, how they come up to a person, how do they meet a person? Are they apologizing for themselves? Or do they come straight into it? And then what do other characters say about them? And then after that, what other characters say about the character. I'll say the other character so we know what we're talking about. So interactions with others, what character says about themselves, what is their personality, what other characters say about the other character. And then in addition to that, we have the relationships. Some of these can be more important than others. So for example, how important is it that Henry and Eleanor have been married for a long time and they have this relationship compared to the relationship between, and I'm going to say this, and it is in comparison to other relationships. For example, the relationship between Henry and Elise. Okay, so the relationship between characters, Henry and Eleanor, and in comparison to other relationships. And then one thing you want to do is look for word clues. Sometimes if you get desperate, that means Pam. If Pam gets desperate, I pick out visual words. What is the author giving us? Because they're also giving clues to the audience. And the audience will fix on those kinds of things, okay? What are those clues? So if we go to our script and we looked at the script that you have, and let's just, everyone please find it in your modules and go to the first, let's see what page we're gonna go to. Let's just head there. I won't screen share it. I want you to go to your modules. It is in it's in week 5. You know what? I can also move it to our line in winter. But the play was assigned in week 5, so that's where the play lives. But we can move it too. So we're in the first module of Lion in Winter, the play. We have Hill. Henry II and his youngest son, John, are practicing a sword fight. Henry, come for me. You're gaining on it, Johnny. Am I, father? Am I really? Off you go now. Run along and practice. Henry Plantagenet goes to his love, Elise Capet. Okay, probably Capet if it's French. So let's just stop right there. What do we find out? What have we found out from just these first few lines? What do we know about Henry?
He's the king.
How do we know he's a king?
Said it in the script, I think.
Well, we don't hear it in the dialogue. How does the audience know he's the king?
He has a crown on.
The audience doesn't know, right? We know he's the king because we've read ahead because we're smart. So yeah, we know he's the king, but we don't know that in those two lines. We have them sword fighting. We have, you're gaining on it, Johnny, come for me. And then Johnny says, am I, father? Am I really? So what do we know about it? We know he's a father.
We know he's teaching his son to fight with the sword.
Teacher. And he's encouraging, isn't he? It's important to remember that he's an encourager, because sometimes he comes off as he's just mean, right? What do we know about John?
He's young.
Why do we think he's young? Someone other than Sue. Why do you think he's young? Who else wants to go? Do I have a hand? Not seeing a hand.
Wait, do you mean just by the dialogue, or because it
Just
literally
by that.
said?
How do we know he's young? Okay, Odalus says his behavior. What do you mean by that, Odalus?
He kind of sounds childish.
Childish. And how is that? How is that told? Looking at the script again, we have, am I, father? Am I really? So Henry's saying, come for me. Come on me. You're gaining on it. You're making progress. And John is like, am I really, father? Am I? I'm like, am I? So he's questioning. He doesn't trust himself. We can tell that. He doesn't trust himself. He has low confidence.
I feel like almost, yeah, he's seeking like reassurance through what he just said to his father.
Seeking assurance. And so we know that something's going on here, right? He wants him to be something that he feels he's not. He wants him to be something he's not ready. He wants him to be stronger. You're gaining on it. Come for me. Those are all very aggressive things. And he's very retiring. Am I? Questioning. In fact, interestingly, almost questioning his father's statement, right? Like, am I? I can't really believe you. I don't really believe you. So think about it, just 2 lines, how much information we have. Let's go a little bit. See, this is how carefully you need to read the script, because you really need to, we're not reading anything into it. Run along and practice. And what's that? Dismissive. Then he dismisses him. What does that say to John? First of all, he uses the diminutive, which in this case may be a sign of affection, but it's definitely the diminutive, which is your lesser than. And then run along and practice. What is that showing us? It's reinforcing. Am I ready? No. Run along and practice. Right? Incredible character information here. And then Henry goes to his love, Alice. So she's here. She's observing all this. So not only is this sword fight happening, but it's happening in front of someone, and in front of someone almost his age, right? Alice is very young. So, you know, he could be looking on her as a wife. Were we really to think about it? That might be the logical match, not this one. But this display is all in front of the French princess. And then Henry says, he'll make a good king. He'll be ready. That's the way. Sees John practicing over here in the field. Come on, my son, you know, good job, good job. So there's somebody else over there that is practicing with him. Then we go to, so also, what do we know about Elise already? So Henry wants her to think highly of him, of John. He'll be ready. Maybe Henry's thinking that there will be a love match, that there will not be a love match, but there will be an arrangement between these two. Because if John becomes king, he's going to die. And then this allegiance with France would be very, very helpful. Okay. And maybe softens it. Come on, you're doing well. And then Alais saying, have you found religion, Henry? Will you look down from heaven and see who's sitting on your throne? Who do you think is going to be on the throne? Henry's saying it's John. Henry's saying, no, I must know before I die. So what is this? What kind of discussion is that? Is that something you want your lover to say to you? Will you look down from heaven and see who's sitting on your throne?
No, she's kind of being sarcastic with him.
But also she's saying, you're old.
Yeah.
You're old, Henry. So this is when we start finding out about Henry. He's old. He has power, but he's old. He's in charge now, but maybe not for long. Right? So there's a timeline to death for him. Maybe he's ailing in some way. Maybe we don't know it quite yet, but maybe he is going to start revealing that he's ailing. And then, of course, he's citing, because this is a contemporary play written after Shakespeare, so this is a joke in a way, right? Because here we are, we're in 1183, Shakespeare's in 1600. The audience knows that King Lear is post 1600, and here we are in 1183. So there's a joke built in here, only for people who, it's gonna go a whole gamut of people. So people who know Shakespeare are gonna appreciate that. People who don't are just gonna listen to the story, right? But Henry reinforces, I must know before I die. He knows there's a timeline. There's a legend of a king called Lear with whom I have a lot in common. So think about King Lear. Who knows about King Lear? When you read a statement like that, you need to figure out what's behind it. That's a research problem. So who is King Lear? What is King Lear about? Well, King Lear, as I just said, is a Shakespeare play, 1600. King Lear, ailing in the aged part of his life. There is no wife in King Lear, however, but he has 3 daughters. Henry has 3 sons. So what's in common? Both of us have kingdoms and 3 children we adore. Both of us are old, but there it ends. He cut his kingdom into bits, and I can't do that. So now we're getting into the gist of Henry. And why can't he do that? Because I've built an empire and I must know it's going to last. So what is that about? Henry has power, and he wants to retain power even after he's dead. Now, you and I know that you can't do that. There's only a certain number of safeguards you can put in place. And even today, when you put safeguards into place, like Rupert Murdoch, you put safeguards into place and then things are split up. Even then they can't agree. So he must know it's going to last. All of Britain, he has half of France, I'm the greatest power in 1,000 years, and after me comes John. Wow. Okay. So his chosen is John. It's clear from the very, very first page. And yet we've been introduced to this guy who is sort of sniveling, can't quite say that he's ready and doesn't know what to do. And then Elise, I'm going to lose you, I'm going to lose you. I'm going to lose you, Henry, aren't I? Elise, in my time I've known contessas, milkmaids, courtesans, novices, whores, gypsies, jades, little boys, but nowhere in God's Western world have I found anyone to love but you. And Rosamond, she's dead. Okay, what do you think I'm going to lose you, Henry, aren't I, refers to? Do you think she's afraid that she's going to lose him to another lover? Or she's going to lose him to death? So think about how that's played, and you have to make a choice. And Eleanor is the next thing. The new Medusa, my good wife. And then Elise shifts. Eleanor is still in the picture. Eleanor has a lot of power. And he tries to dismiss that and put that down. So now we find out about Eleanor. The new Medusa, my good wife, Medusa, the goddess with the snakes, meaning she can strike in a lot of different ways. How is your queen? Elise says, decaying, I suppose. Don't be jealous of the Gorgon. She's not among the things I love. How many husbands do you know who dungeon up their wives? I haven't kept the great bitch in the keep for 10 years out of passionate attachment. So he has her locked up in the tower, right? So then he's referring to, he sees someone, there's Captain Marshall. William, we'll be holding Christmas court at Chinon. We've been asked the King of France to join us. I want Richard there and Geoffrey. Go find my boys and tell them, then go fetch the Queen from Salisbury Tower. So Geoffrey is a worker, captain. He's a soldier. He's going to do the bidding of the king, and the king is showing his power here. I want Richard there and Geoffrey, go find my boys, and then go fetch the Queen. So that's how we start the play, and that's how we find out about the characters. So I want you to start thinking about the characters in this way. All the information that you have from reading the play from beginning to end, the audience doesn't have that privilege. So we need to show that in the beginning. Is the king going to be sword fighting with a crown on? Doubtful. How else do we show that he's king?
Close?
Sure. Yeah, we're out of time. So I just want you to be thinking in those deep terms. Every word on the page indicates something for the character. Have I missed any questions? I don't see any hands. Questions? Okay, last minute things at all? All right, thanks, Odalys. Thanks for your response. Thanks for letting me know.
Can I just say something about tomorrow, class?
Sue, hold on a minute. Sure, if you want to say something about another class.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Then go ahead and take off. I'll see you on Wednesday, and let's see, I'm supposed to be doing something, right? Am I supposed to give you? I'm going to upload those pictures for you. I do have those, and I will, I have another picture I want to show you, which is really cool based on the medieval shapes, but it's very contemporary. I think it'll be fun. So see you later.
Thank you, Pam. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Okay, Sue, what's up about tomorrow?
Okay, tomorrow I have a doctor's appointment on Zoom at 8:40.
Yeah.
But so I might be late coming to class because my doctor notoriously is late.
Okay.
Okay.
I think you already emailed me that.
Okay, but also I want to say that My contractor, he called me while we were having class. That's kind of how I got knocked off, I think.
Oh, yeah, that can happen. Yeah.
And he's gonna stop doing my house tomorrow. So I just want you to know that I might not be able to say anything. I might just have to send chat messages.
Yeah, you said that to me in the email. That's totally fine.
Okay, I told you that. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that.
No, that's perfectly okay. It's always good to have a reminder.
Okay, so
Okay.
and all week probably it'll be like that because he's working on the bathroom. It might take a while, I'm not sure.
You know, we can't choose when our dog barks either.
I don't have